What if the life you're living isn't actually yours, but a version shaped by fear, old wounds, and silent expectations? Welcome back to the Grateful Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Wagoner, and today's episode is all about reclaiming your real life, the one that you were meant to live. My guest is Dr. Wendy O'Connor, a powerhouse therapist, life strategist, and emotional architect who has helped thousands of people all around the world rewrite their inner stories and step into lives of purpose, clarity, and connection. With over 2 decades of experience in psychology, neuroscience, and personal transformation, Dr. Wendy blends cutting-edge science with deep soul work, and in a world full of noise, she's a rare voice of grounded truth. Dr. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Well, that is the most incredible introduction I've ever heard about myself. I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I love doing the intros in front of guests. It's a real it's a treat for everyone, I think, and starts us off on a good foot.
Absolutely. I want to hear it again and again.
So my first question for you is, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. So, in case you didn't see this before when we were connecting, I am an 18-year-old, so I'm a high school student. I'm about to graduate. Um, and I've been thinking about the default setting of a lot of people. And I feel like there are people that have different settings in their lives or switch the way they're thinking. I'm rereading Siddhartha right now by Hermann Hesse, and this is covered in that as well. Um, so my question for you is, what do you think the default setting is for many of us?
Default settings, what I call the conditioned setting. It's basically a combination of the lessons that we've been taught, the messages that we have absorbed from our outside world. So we are told pretty early on messages that we internalize, like you are good or you are bad, you are good enough, you are capable, you should be scared, you should feel safe. And these messages we internalize at pretty young ages, is what we see. Because of that, our brains are primed to look for evidence that supports that already constructed belief about ourselves or about other people or about our future or the world. What that means is throughout the years of elementary school, middle school, high school, young adulthood, we create lives that we believe are a reflection of who we are. And this conditioning, so we may get messages from peers, parents, teachers, coaches, these messages that we have gotten into our heads, and then we look for evidence that supports those messages. That becomes what we believe is meant for us. People then live on default mode from the conditioning that has been influencing their thoughts and beliefs for years. This looks like for many people going through the motions of going to high school, going to college, graduating, getting a good job, getting an apartment, settling down, getting married, having kids, buying a house. It's this process that people tend to think should happen in a particular way. But my argument is that we've actually just been told that that's the way to happiness or that's the way to success. But what I've discovered is many people wake up at some point during this journey and say, I've done all the right things. Is this really as good as it gets? I don't think this was my unique path. This is just what I followed from what I believed in my head and what I saw other people do. So that becomes the default. Every day, checking boxes, going through the motions, Groundhog's Day is the default path.
I heard you call it languishing you said that on your website, and that was a very interesting word that I'd never heard before. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, languishing is basically just what we're talking about now. This idea that life is meh. We're not lit up. We're not excited to get out of bed. We're not depressed. We're just like going through the motions. It feels
Yeah.
kind of robotic. It feels predictable. It feels prescribed, is a word I often will use. That people will typically feel like my life is prescribed. I just show up to
Oh.
it every day. I'm just supposed to show up and go through the motions of a day, go to sleep and do it again. Languishing is this sense of not feeling excited or lit up by your life. You're just kind of settling, surviving it, tolerating it?
Yeah. And so why is this a problem?
Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, because I believe to my core that life is meant to be seized and savored. It's meant to be yours by design. And I first really learned this about myself anyway. And I was reflecting on this at the gym this morning, funny enough. I went to Stanford to get my doctorate in clinical psychology. We're sitting in one of our final classes, and the professor asks us to go around the room and to share what we want to do with our degree. And of
Hmm.
course, many of my cohort wants to change the world, cure depression, open hospitals, clinics, all this big stuff. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, should I be honest or should I make something up that sounds really fancy and exciting? And I chose to go
Yeah.
the route of honesty. And I said, I want to have a small private practice and make jam and babies and call it a day. My view of my life was never meant to be the conditioned route, the default route of what should be. And I knew early on that what I wanted was happiness, peace, balance, contentment. So that was my path. That was my chosen path of I'm not looking to do something that I have to change the whole world, that I have to cure somebody. What I really want is to make an impact, but through my purpose and
Hmm.
my passion and just my uniqueness of who I am. So if you ask me, the reason that languishing is a problem is because we're not living up to our full potential of seizing and savoring this life. And if that's the case, what's the point? Are we just, why would we live in a life existence just to survive it or just to settle for it, just to tolerate it? If we get this one chance, why wouldn't we do what we can, learn what we can, transform in ways that we didn't even know possible to absolutely love it and to be so excited to wake up in the morning?
There's this beautiful quote by Chris Williamson, a fellow podcaster, where he says, "We sacrifice what we want for the thing that's supposed to get it." And I think that is so, well, that encapsulates what you're talking about, where there's this difference between you had to choose, do I want to lie and conform and do what society tells me is the right thing to do that will get me the things I want, or do I want to just do the thing that'll get me the thing I want? I see this often too because as like you were graduating grad school, graduating high school, people say, or what are you going to go get a degree in? What are you going to major in? What do you want to do with that? And there's often these, uh, everyone says something elaborate um, and figured out, and there's often these voices in my head to do the same thing. But I've been trying to ground in the real answer, which is, I don't know. I'm going to study behavioral neuroscience. I'm pursuing that because that's what I want. That's what I'm interested in. And I think there's something so freeing about that honesty with yourself and other people.
It is absolutely the most freeing, but it's the thing that people fear the most is truly living into their authentic selves. Living a life that they design that is marries what you're naturally good at, your strengths, your character strengths, marries what your values are, marries what you desire. Those three pieces can lead you to the happiest existence. But so many are afraid of, and I remember in that moment of, yes, I could conform and make something up that sounds very, very influential and important. But I just thought to myself, why? I actually am
Right.
not here to impress anybody. I don't care about impressing anybody. I just want to live a life that's true to my purpose. And having known what my purpose has been for a very long time, that feels like a gift to me. And every day waking up to pursue it, that's all I need. I just need to live a life that I value. I just need to live a life that like reflects who I am at my best. It feels really simple to me. But the fear that so many have of being authentic because of other people's judgment or disapproval or fear of it not working and then being embarrassed that they have to reroute their course, reroute their path, it really keeps people living and playing small. And I just find that so disheartening.
So why do you think that you were able to make that choice and not lie to yourself and be authentic to yourself when so many others struggle to do so? What set you apart?
I had a taste of freedom that I never wanted to let go of. And so, what I mean by that is my first 18 years of life were being raised in a very anxious, volatile home, a lot of control, a lot of just feeling hovered over. I grew up with a lot of anxiety. I did not feel like I could even access who I truly was. It was like I just was in survival mode for, I want to say, most of my childhood. And that changed as soon as I went to undergrad. And I went to undergrad at the University of Vermont in Burlington. And I remember, and I'll never forget, this life-changing moment. I was sitting on my loft bed, and my mother called to check in. And I was telling her about how the first week of college was going. And I started to tear up, and I was like, why am I crying? What's going on? And what happened was I realized that I had been crying these tears of joy, that I had found freedom. I could breathe, I could exhale, I could explore who I was, I could find friends, I just had this freedom I never had before. And ever since that moment, I said to myself, and I remember this, I said, never again. Never again will I not have power over my future, power over my choices. My life will be my design forevermore. And that for me was like just experiencing that discrepancy between what life was and what could be was never lost on me. And it was this combination of empowerment and gratitude I felt in that moment that changed the course of my life forever. And I still sit here at 46 years old and say, I will never go back on those words ever.
Huh. That's beautiful. I find it so interesting when people have these profound moments, like singular moments where you can say, there, that moment, that's when my life changed. Do you find that to be a common thing among people who have this freeing mindset, or does it not always have to come in like one single moment?
You know, uh, it seems like that may actually not be the most common way that people figure out their path or course correct or create freedom for themselves. I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of all the people that I've worked with, and I
Mhm.
don't recall there being this singular moment. It's for a lot of the people that are in my world and that I work with, it's more of a kind of a churning. I think they
Interesting.
would describe it more of like this churning, this yearning, this kind of rumbling, the whisper, the going to sleep at night, being like, is this as good as it gets? Waking up in the morning, wanting to snooze away the morning, not wanting to face a day. It's kind of this quieter voice. And I think it's louder for me because I think I noticed it early and I noticed it and I chose to acknowledge it. Whereas I think that that intuition that a lot of us do just have natural to us is so quiet at first that people don't pay attention or listen or override it.
Right.
So I think it's usually more of a churning of an experience of waking up. And this is what I see more is people waking up and saying, this can't be it. Like
Hmm.
success on paper, I've nailed it. Happiness on paper, I've nailed it. Why am I not feeling it? Why is what I'm experiencing internally not what's reflected externally in my life? So I think it's more of a quieter rumble for a little while before people actually give themselves, and this is a word I use all the time, permission to see and to speak their truth.
Interesting. Yeah, so we've talked a lot about so far, like the anxiety we feel contrasted with the freedom that we could feel, right? So there's this gap here that most people have in their lives, and your work is to close that gap a little bit. So talk to me about how we do that. You talk a lot about designing your life. What does that mean on a psychological or spiritual sense?
Yeah, I created a program called Your Life by Design, Life by Design. And this really just takes ideas from strengths based work, values based work, and desires based work. So basically, it takes people through this journey of getting to know thyself, which is the most important piece, building awareness around where you are in your life, where the gaps are, where you're not satisfied, not lit up, reconnecting with yourself, who you are, what you're about, your true purpose, what you're passionate about, what gets you excited. And then it comes down to actually road mapping out what a life would look like that really reflects who you're meant to be, who you are at your best. So I take a lot of psychology concepts and tools, both from positive psychology and cognitive behavioral work, and help people rewrite the stories that are keeping them feeling trapped or stuck or held back by their own conditioning, by their own beliefs about themselves, and learn how to adopt new stories, therefore, a new life, a new lifestyle.
So when you say rewrite the stories, we're not talking about rewriting the past, but the future, right? We're rewriting expectations we have for ourselves, or are we rewriting the lens in which we view our past? Explain that a little bit for me.
If you want to, the past matters less than the future in my world. Like the work that I do, it's not super focused on, we don't do trauma work. It's not about healing the past. You can absolutely choose how you look at your past. That's always an option. That's always a possibility. You have that opportunity every single day. If you don't like the way something from your past has impacted you or continues to, you can change the lens you look through and say, I'm
Hmm.
going to look at this from a different perspective. Now I'm not going to suffer anymore for my past, which I highly recommend. But really, the work that I do is about not just expectations of the future. It's really about understanding that the reasons you don't have what you want out of your life yet is because you haven't given yourself permission to have it, to go for it, to
Yeah.
get it. The reason you haven't given yourself permission are because the voices in your head, the stories that live there that have been deeply entrenched over the years of conditioning, are so
Hmm.
loud and feel like facts. So feelings become, for a lot of us, feelings become more than just a feeling. They become truly in our minds just the way it is. When we
Huh.
live a life based on just the way it is, we're going to live the languishing default life. When you learn how to rewire the way that you see yourself and the way you see your world, what's possible for you, what's an opportunity for you, this is where you're actually going to step into your power and be able to change what your lifestyle and your future look like, from relationships to jobs to hobbies and interests to all of it.
One of the hardest parts with this that I see in my own life and with others is that it's so hard nowadays, especially, to differentiate between our inner voices and other things. We're constantly being fed information in any free time. We're on our phones scrolling. Our conditioning has been like it has to have been multiplied by many factors. And so, how can someone start to trust this inner voice or recognize even this inner voice when it's been drowned out by outside noise and expectations for such a long time?
It's a great question. It can take a little bit of time, but the key piece is reconnecting with yourself. That's why what I call your North Star, your values, strengths, and desires are so important to reconnect with. One of the reasons that that inner voice gets so quiet and can be drowned out is because there's so much outside of ourselves going on. We spend more time consuming than creating.
Hmm.
But when you stop consuming all the time, when you push pause on that, when you create carved out space to reconnect with creating for yourself, a connection of who am I? What am I about? What is my purpose? What am I passionate about? What am I meant for? What do I love? What excites me? Then all of a sudden you can start to say, oh, that's my voice. That's the real voice inside of me that's speaking to a life that I really crave. You can also do what we call the externalization of voices, which is, and I'll ask my clients to do this often when they notice patterns of the same types of thoughts that circle around one or two main beliefs, is to ask themselves, whose voice is this really? Where did you
Hmm.
learn that? Where did you hear that?
Interesting.
Where did this thought come from? Who does that remind you of? Or what does this remind you of? And oftentimes we can name someone or even multiple people in our history that comes up. And we say to ourselves, oh, that's totally that teacher, or that's that bully, or that was that coach, or that's my mom, or that's my sister, or that friend. That's the voice that they had. But I took that voice and I made it mine. I believed that was true because it was said so many times, or because it
Hmm.
was shown to me so many times. So it's a combination of being able to create space between the what you're just assuming is the truth and whose voice that actually could be. And it's very well not your own, and also connecting between your true voice. And the way we do that is by increasing self awareness and connecting to self.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. I love the getting to the root of the different voices in our heads. Is it necessary, or necessary is a strong word, but do you need, is it easier to figure out where your thoughts are rooted before you can let go of them?
No,
No.
you don't. I think it's helpful because what happens for a lot of people is that at first, when we talk about rewiring your mindset or rewriting your stories, a lot of times people are like, I don't even understand. Like, where do I start? I don't get it. How do I know what's this or that or what's true or what's false? And so that can just feel overwhelming. But when we think about it from this perspective of, you know, really being able to say, let's dial it in, let's dial it in and talk about what the fear has actually been for you that has held you back. That is actually a place that a lot of people will say, oh, okay, now I get it. Like, I know whose voice that can be. I know what that can be. I know what could be shifted instead. But a lot of it is under that fear piece for a lot of people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's very interesting. This is reminding me, I know I mentioned that I'm rereading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse at the beginning of this. Have you read that book?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I won't spoil anything. Very, very good book. One of the most influential in my life when I first started. Like, if we think back to my point where things started to shift, and it was one of the first books I read there. So it's been very influential. This is my first time rereading it. And the point that's really sticking with me is that Siddhartha, it's not Siddhartha Gautama, Gautam. I don't even, I can't talk today. It's not the Buddha, but he meets the Buddha, and he actually rejects his teachings because he said, uh, "You did not get to your point by following anyone's teachings. You followed your own teachings. You went on a journey yourself." So he said to the Buddha, "I'm not going to be able to get to your point by following your teachings. I have to find and experience this by myself." And the way that this relates to what we're talking about, I think, is that we need to let go of what everyone else has told us is right, or our life, and figure out what our life is to us in order to find that fulfillment and that freedom. Am I right about that? Is that a good connection to draw?
It's a great connection. Oftentimes, the way I'll describe it is it's like it's almost more of an unbecoming than a becoming. This
Okay.
journey
Yeah.
to living the life that excites you, that lights you up, that feels really aligned for you is often about unbecoming the things that you weren't, unbecoming the
Mhm.
things that you didn't need to believe or think, unbecoming the things that weren't true. And that inevitably just creates space for what is true, for what is aligned, for what is meant for you. A lot of times it is almost like this disrobing of years of our journeys so that we can reconnect with what is meant for us or what we want it to be or what we want and desire for it to be. And oftentimes that robe is just very thick and very heavy. And so
Yeah.
a lot of times people just settle for wearing it because they don't know that there's an alternative. That's where this work comes in, is realizing it's about finding that alternative to the life that you've settled for.
So hearing you say that, I'm curious. When someone gives you a new opportunity, is your default answer yes or no?
What's the opportunity? Is it aligned?
Okay. Yeah, it depends. So I've been doing a lot of reflection recently, because I've been a yes man. I say yes to a lot of things, but I realized how misaligned that can make me, right? Because I'm saying yes to these opportunities, thinking, oh, there could be all these things in it. But I realized that one of my gifts is I do know what I love at such a young age. And so while a lot of people, I think it's great to be saying yes to a lot of things, I should protect that direction I have, and uh, that alignment that I've already started to build, and say no to more. And that's been a conscious practice that I've been doing very well at the past few weeks. But up until then, I was very, very bad at it. So I was interested to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. Both should be used wisely. Yeses and nos, we should be discerning with our yeses and discerning with our nos. But saying yes when you really wish you said no, or want to say no, or feel like you can't say no, right? That's the work. That's the opportunity that people have, is to say no when they mean no, and yes when they mean yes. And people will say, and I've said in the past too, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And I don't really 100% agree with that. I don't think that it's always going to feel like a hell yes, because I think that that internal voice, that self-trust can be quiet. And because it's not the prominent voice, it's harder to really listen to. And so sometimes hell yeses are more of a curiosity and an interest than an absolute. So this is where people can
Interesting.
get confused about what to say yes and no to, or where their boundaries should be, because they think the louder voice must be the right voice. Like if that's the voice, that's the response or the reaction, that must be the right one. But really, because some things in our minds can be so backwards through the years of being people pleasers or having FOMO or whatever it is, it can make our yeses and nos feel a bit murky and confusing. Listening to that
Interesting.
voice of self-trust and aligning with what you most want, right? Again, with your North Star, values, strengths, desires. This is where you'll make choices that feel much easier and aligned to make, because they are by your design. They're not from outside pressure or expectation on you.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Grateful Podcast. I'm interrupting to let you know that it would mean the world to me if you could share this episode with someone that you think would enjoy it, or leave a review down below so I can learn what I can do better and what I'm doing well with this podcast. It's a passion project, and I really want it to turn into something that helps people everywhere. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So, when you're going to make a decision, let's say it's in the fuzzy area where it's not a hell yes, it's not a hell no, you're not really sure what it is. How do you go about making that decision?
It's a big question, because we could be talking about anything. We could be talking about micro decisions and macro decisions in our lives, but
Hmm.
ultimately, the way that we want to make them overall is by connecting to what your strengths, values, and desires are, and playing the tape forward. Let's imagine you said yes to this opportunity. Let's imagine you said no to this opportunity. What does that look like? What do we think it looks like? And we don't have guarantees. There's no true predictability of it. But we can have a hunch, or we can have wisdom, or we can have experience in life to say, well, I can imagine that it's likely to go in this way if I say yes. I'm likely to feel this way if I say yes, and then it's likely to go in this direction if I say no. I'm likely to feel this way if I say no. And exploring those are really important, because one of the things that makes people say yes more than they want to is thinking that they're going to feel badly if they say no. They'll feel guilt, or
Hmm.
they'll feel shame, or they'll feel like they disappointed somebody. And that's not a reason to say yes. So exploring playing the tape forward, imagining that you feel bad or guilty for the no that you had said, and then how to navigate that is actually where that work lies. So it really depends on how big or small we're talking about of a decision. But a lot of people will come into work with me because they want life to be better. And that does involve not only micro lifestyle daily decisions, but sometimes it's going to include the big ones. The beginning of that decision making process is the same. What are your core values? What are your top strengths? What do you most want your life to be about?
Yeah.
That's when we can like use that as our major umbrella and then trickle down into the details.
So the when we're talking about goals and strengths and we're designing our life for the future, um, how rigid is that? Because I've found in my life when I set a goal, let's say like over a year out, I often find that my priorities in my life and my goals and my strengths, all those are very fluid concepts. They're changing. Um, and so I've been trying to work with myself to find what the ideal timeline for a goal is. And obviously, it depends on the tasks or the goal itself. But I found that setting a goal too far in the future is often limiting for myself, because I don't want to make a decision for my future self. I don't want my future self to be burdened by a decision that past Jack made. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It's an interesting assumption that the future you would be burdened by your current goals. What if the
Yeah.
future you is so grateful that you set the goals you did today, because it made life even more remarkable than you could have imagined when you set the goal? So I do not typically set long-term goals. I
Uh-huh.
never really have. I tend to usually focus more month to month. And so I have a
Okay.
planner, also happy to share it with your listeners, a free planner you can download that just lets you each month look at your month ahead and say, what are the strengths I want to highlight? What are the values I want to highlight? What are the goals, if any, that I want to focus on this month? Because 30 days is a lot easier for us to buy
Mm,
into and to stay focused on than a year from now. And like you're saying, who knows where we'll be, how we'll feel if we would have been grateful we set this goal or if we will feel burdened by this goal. So shorter term seems to keep people invested in goals more. Connecting with long-term goals is obviously an option, but I think it is more challenging for people to feel invested because it doesn't feel real. It's so far off.
right. I love the 30-day idea. I think monthly goals are great, and you're right. It feels like we can tangibly see progress toward them as well. To go back to the burden goal, I think it does depend. When I talk about that, I talk about, say, like, if we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where let's say I have an exact goal for what I want my job to be coming out of college, right? That's 4 years from now. And what feels like instead of limiting myself to one linear path in the way that I see it, like this Jack to this Jack with this certain job, I would rather approach life in the way that I'm going to I'm going to go through all the doors that are open when I'm following things that are interesting to me. So as I said, I'm going to get a degree in behavioral neuroscience. So as I do that and I follow the things that are interesting to me, I have this idea that there are many doors that open like coming out from it, right? And I can choose what's most interesting to me then and then and then. And I'm creating this path that's more fluid. It's more with my phases in my life at that point. And I think from and I'm very young, so I'm always learning and open to new ideas on my hypotheses in life. But my hypothesis is that that is how we create fulfillment and presence altogether.
I could see that. I knew it since seventh grade that I wanted to be a psychologist. So that could be seen as a narrow path, but it never felt
Mhm.
narrow to me because I knew even just
Interesting.
pursuing the degree, there's so many options, so many paths you could take. You could make it your own. And I fully believe if you pursue what you're passionate about, interested in, excited for, that you could make money doing anything, you could have a career doing anything. That's really about you feeling very connected to the work, whatever that work is the most important piece. So absolutely, you're going into a field where there is a lot of paths, there's a lot of options for you. It doesn't close doors and it really meets where you're at right now with your natural organic interest and curiosity.
I think that's beautiful how we've both like found uh you can find fulfillment through different ways, and your way is you knew what you wanted from a young age, and people can also like go with different things and try on different hats. I think that's one of the beauties of life and the freedoms of life, that we can reach the same goal through different means. And that's where, coming back to how we started this conversation, the conformist idea of this is the path that everyone should take to reach the goal that we want, that's where that's wrong. That's where we need to uh, move away from that and find the way that works for us. And I think that that's a very beautiful takeaway right there.
We do need to find the way that truly reflects how we want to feel in this life. And when you ask the question of why does languishing matter? Why does happiness matter? It's everyone's pursuing happiness. It is the thing that people want most. And what we've learned, especially from people who are at end of life, is that there are regrets, and the biggest regrets are typically around, I wish I just enjoyed my life more. I wish I just let myself be me. I wish I lived more authentically. I wish I just let myself pursue what mattered to me. And it wasn't so much this life of living in somebody else's box or living within somebody else's expectations or parameters of me. So living the good life, living a life that matters, is living a life that you look back at end of life and don't regret. Not being you, not taking chances, not letting yourself live boldly and freely and by your own wishes, wants, and desires. So it does, it's really such the foundation of why I do this work now. And transitioning from just doing the clinical focus into the coaching world reflected this again in my life. It was this idea of in the clinical space, there's a lot of restriction and parameters, and it's more closed off. In that world of coaching, it's like I can help people around the world recognize that they just haven't given themselves permission to consider alternatives to how they've lived. And they've allowed other people's opinions and voices be louder than their own. And the idea that that's creating a ripple effect in the world is actually far beyond what I said in graduate school at that table when I was just going to make jam and babies and a small private practice. It's already bigger than I ever could have imagined. And it
Right.
already has had such an impact on people just waking up to realize how much of their lifestyle has actually been influenced by how they've been conditioned all these years. If you just wake up and give yourself permission to see another choice, a whole new life can be available to you.
That's so amazing and so cool that you've made that happen and you've yeah, and you've worked beyond what you just said at that table in graduate school. I have so much respect for that. Um, we you talked about how, or we've all talked about how we have this idea of what we want, right, in the future, and but we have these regrets that are common among all humans, the regrets of not living enough and what you just mentioned. So, why do you think that no matter how many people seem to come out and say, this is what I regret after pursuing the path that you're going down, people still pursue that path? And how do you think that we can help foster change among young individuals that are pursuing the material goals over the happiness that all of us intrinsically want?
Mm. Our brains are designed to keep us safe and alive. Our brains are wired to protect us, not to make us happy. And
Hmm.
so, if we understand the way that our brains work, and we understand that our brain is really going to be filtering out what it considers to be extraneous or unnecessary, and it's really going to always be focused on what is safety, what is protection, then we're looking at a life that repeats itself day in and day out. Your brain likes predictability. Your brain likes comfort. Your brain likes to know that tomorrow's safe, today's safe. Let's just do the same thing that kept me safe and alive today, tomorrow. And that is why so many people will live the same life over and over again, even though they may voice wanting something to be different, or they may voice complaints about their current lifestyle or their relationships, career, jobs. It's because there's this disconnect. There is not enough people really understand that there is an alternative, that your
Hmm.
brain is not your cheerleader. It's not your best friend. It's not there to support you in your dreams. It's there to keep you alive and safe. So when we understand the main role that our brain plays in our lives, then more people will start to recognize, oh, okay, if this is the track my brain will take me on for safety, then my role, my opportunity, if I want to live happier, is to leave the comfort zone, to step into the fear zone, to step into the
Yeah.
discomfort, to step into the uncertainty and the unknown, because your brain's not going to encourage you to do that, but your dreams will, your desires will. And if you listen a little bit more, prioritize that inner voice more than prioritizing the safety, you'll be able to create more strides with up leveling your life, evolving your life, transforming your life. But so many people assume that what my brain tells me is fact, what my brain tells me is true, what my brain fears must be right. And we live in that small world of protection and comfort zone. But what I always say about the comfort zone is where your dreams go to die. It is the dream graveyard for so many people because they don't realize that once we leave the comfort zone, enter the fear zone, pass through the fear zone, into the learning zone, this is what takes us on a journey towards the growth zone. This is where we actually get to live the life you dream of. It's like, I'll joke about it. It's like you can't get to grandmother's house without going over the river and through the woods. You need
Yeah.
to go through this journey to get what you want, to get where you want to go. And it's going to be potentially scary, there will be fear involved. You can't avoid the fear. We just need to embrace that it's a normal part of the experience. But we do need to leave comfort zone to get what you want. What you want doesn't live there already, unless you're content as you are today. And I'm not speaking to those people. I'm speaking to those who know that they're meant for more or something different, but they haven't given themselves permission to create it.
I love the grandmother's house analogy. um, so the idea that there are people that know that they're meant for more. I've started a platform uh, with a similar audience, and I have this hypothesis of the duality of gratitude and ambition, and that's a lot of what this podcast is based on. I think that the formula for a fulfilling life is balancing gratitude for the present moment, what you have right now, and focusing on abundance, but also being ambitious and working towards goals in the future. I find that very ambitious people often sacrifice the present moment. It's like what we talked about earlier. We sacrifice what we want for the thing that's supposed to get it, right? Um, and so my question for you is, how do uh, you think people, uh, what is the right balance between going after something in the future and trying to obtain that you know you're capable of with while also staying here right now and grounded?
To me, it feels simple. It's just bringing gratitude along with you every step of the way. There's a lot of people that will do gratitude practices to keep it top of mind, to work on that skill of being more present and in the moment. But you can have both at the same time. I can be grateful that I'm in this conversation with you right now and know that part of my day today is about the ambition that I have for tomorrow. And one doesn't take away from the other. It doesn't ever have to. Gratitude just gets to come along for the ride everywhere. Much like fear will come along for the ride, fortunately, unfortunately, but gratitude gets to be a choice. So if you're weaving it into your lifestyle, you're weaving it into your mindset, the way you show up to a day, the way you close a day, the way that you start a new chapter of life can always be with gratitude. You can always be grateful for what you have and what want for more. And that's another thing I feel like is a common misconception. People will
Hmm.
they'll come into my world and say things like, I should just be more grateful for what I have. My life's not that bad. I don't really have anything to complain about, but I just know something's missing, or I just know this isn't what I wanted. But life is still so good. Like, I shouldn't really complain. I should just be more grateful. And I would always say, be grateful and want for more, and let's go create it. You get to have both. So, how ambitious you are gets to be your choice. Are you the small private practice and making jams ambition? Are you the changing the world, creating hospitals and clinics ambition, writing best-selling books ambition, or just committing to a daily journaling practice for your own private thoughts ambition? How you decide that reflects what you value and who you are is unique to you. And this is where people need to stop feeling like the comparison is robbing their joy and that they're not enough and that they're behind and all the stories we tell ourselves, because it just gets to be your way. And there's no one that gets to have that power over you telling you anything else unless you give them permission to.
Right. Yeah. Great answer. Um, so you said that our brains are designed to keep us safe, not make us happy, right?
Yeah.
So how do we, what part of us are we getting in tune with and in touch with when we're figuring out, is this enough right now?
If you're asking yourself, is this enough right now? That's likely because something feels like it's missing. If you're asking yourself these questions, and this is the thing, a lot of people will have conversations with themselves and argue against themselves or dismiss what their inner voice is saying. If you're saying, is this enough? You're probably saying to yourself, this isn't enough. If we're trying to convince ourselves or argue with ourselves or, prove to ourselves that like this should be enough, then we're probably not completely content. There's probably some disconnect that's happening. So if you even ask yourself the question, my take is there's something there. What's there? What's missing? What are you longing for? Where's the gap? What feels like it's not full potential, or what's not living up to your standards or your hopes for your life? And exploring that question with the answer. right? I feel like that's why we ask ourselves those questions. It's if we're when we're content and fulfilled and lit up, we're not asking, is it enough? We're not asking that question. We're living our lives. We're not overthinking these things. We're just living and doing and acting and living the aligned life that we designed. So the question itself, it would be something I'd be curious about. Where am I getting the idea that it might not be enough? What's popping into my head? What's that little voice telling me?
To get to the root of things like that, do you recommend journaling? I found that helpful personally.
Journaling can be very helpful. Absolutely. I'm not a big journaler. Not my vibe as much as it can be for some people, but absolutely journaling can be. Obviously, working with a coach, like hiring somebody to see beyond what you see for yourself is what will collapse time for you when it comes to creating the life that you want. Of course, you can do it on your own. You can absolutely every day be asking yourself the right questions and exploring it with yourself, thinking things through, processing with people in your world 100%. But if we oftentimes we feel like life is precious, life is fast moving. And so having somebody in your corner to help ask the right questions, help get uncover and reveal those answers for you can speed that process up a bit.
Yeah, I love that. And I find it so interesting how so many people would pay, let's say, $100 an hour to make $1 million or whatever. But people are much more hesitant to pay $100 an hour to count to have a talk with somebody that's going to help their mental health and make them feel better and more aligned and more fulfilled. And I think I've seen a movement more towards that, which I think is a great direction for society to go in. I'm sure that you agree with me on that. But yeah, it's very interesting how people would jump at an opportunity to pay someone to teach them how to make money, but are much uh, less willing to pay someone to teach them to be happy.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely right. What's interesting, though, I will say, is that a lot of people that hire me are like-minded. So they're often women who want to live more lit up and realize that there is something that either they've been disconnected with for years and they want to reconnect, or that they've never lived their full potential because they're ambitious humans. So a lot of
Hmm.
doctors, a lot of therapists, psychologists, nurse practitioners, authors, a lot of entrepreneurial types, ambitious, high achieving people will come into my world and say, this is worth absolutely pursuing what my next level would look like, what my next level life would look like, because they already value it's part of their value system. So that's what another place where values come in so much, and especially in this little corner of the world in my coaching business, it's about those like-minded people who already value the balance of ambition and gratitude, or value the balance of achievement and peace, achievement and happiness and contentment. And so I find that you'll notice a natural filtering that exists. Those who value that
Interesting.
are already on that path to a certain degree or really want to be.
Right. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I have one last question I always ask people, simple, but what are you grateful for right now?
I'm grateful for this conversation, honestly. I really, really, really love so much the idea that one person's life might be influenced, changed, affected by this talk, by this convo, by these answers. And that gets me really excited. So having this space, sharing this space and time with you, I'm really grateful for, not only because it can have an incredible impact and ripple effect, but also because for me, these conversations reconnect me to why I do what I do, why
Yeah.
am here every day, why this matters to me. And so I feel very grateful to just have the opportunity to reconnect with my passion on this as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for this conversation as well. Your energy is it's so contagious. I can really tell that you do feel that freedom and that you are doing something that is so aligned. And it makes me feel more aligned with what I'm doing as well. And I hope that the listeners and the viewers felt that as well. And I think that's one of the best traits that a person can have. So you're definitely doing the right thing for you. I love that.
this is what it looks like. And I appreciate you saying that because I will hear that a lot about my energy, which I always think is interesting because it feels just natural. But I will say, this is what it looks like, sounds like, feels like to live in line with your strengths, what you're naturally good at. And zest is a top strength for me. Having zest, having hope, that is natural for me. And I get to do something that highlights those strengths. That's when you get to just feel like what you're sharing is just an extension of you. And so I
Yeah.
feel grateful to have that. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. And yeah, I will I'll link everything down in my bio, but or in the description, but let my audience know where you would like them to find you as well.
Of course, come say hi anytime. I'm on almost every platform, if not every platform now, but Instagram is where I hang out the most with Dr. Wendy O'Connor. Feel free to come say hi, introduce yourself, share with me what's going on in your life. I love meeting new people. And if there's ever any way I can help any of your listeners, I'd be honored.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy. This was
Thank
amazing.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Grateful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could either share this episode with friends and family who you think would enjoy it, or leave a review down below on what I can do to make this better for you and for other listeners. All that would just help me be able to spread my message of gratitude and living a purposeful life. I hope you have a great day. See you soon.